The 2026 Sydney Film Festival wrapped on June 13. This was my third consecutive year attending the festival, and I'm excited to tell you about what happened this year. Hey there, I'm Adam, and among many other things, I'm an actor. This is fast becoming my favourite time of year. I really love the Sydney Film Festival. Having attended now 3 years in a row, and having had my favourite film of the year come from the festival in both of the previous two attendances, in 2024 it was The Substance, and in 2025 it was The Life of Chuck, I was really excited to get along this year, and I had the chance to see 5 of the films that were on show. Once again, the vibe in the city was fantastic. If you had a chance to be around any of the movie theatres while there were screenings happening, or even just being in the city on the weekend, in the general vicinity of Town Hall, there's just kind of a buzz, and you can feel it walking down the street, and you can see all of the people lining up to get in to the venues, and it made me feel optimistic that, people actually are hungry to go out and see movies. And it really is the case that all of the cinemas are packed. To actually get a good seat at one of these screenings, you have to be really switched on to buy the tickets well in advance. I think just about every screening I went to was completely sold out, and some of these theatres are seating up to 2,000 people at a time. This obviously can't happen without a huge number of volunteers, so if there is a volunteer listening to this right now, let me just say thank you so much. It's clear that there is a huge amount of work that the volunteers at this festival have to do, and there's no way that it would run as smoothly as it does without them. I think one of the things that makes the festival so special is some of the venues. The Sydney State Theatre is probably one of the most beautiful buildings I've been inside of. I love having any excuse to go there. Clearly the organisers know what Sydney has in terms of heritage building movie theatres. So in addition to the State Theatre, there are some gorgeous Art Deco theatres. The Ritz is one that I've been familiar with and been to see many movies there, but it's always a pleasure to get to go back there during festival time. And this year I had the chance to go to the Hayden Orpheum for the first time, and that place just blew me away. It is really well preserved, but also updated. So you have all of the kind of modern things you would expect from a movie theatre, but all in that style of that sort of 1930s deco, which is it's just so cool to get to go to a movie theatre in a place like that. Okay, but let's talk about the films themselves. The first film I got along to see was Colony. Now, I feel like the pitch for this movie would be if Train to Busan met Die Hard. And if you like the sound of that, you're gonna like this movie. It's directed by Yeon Sang-ho, who was the director of Train to Busan, so it's no coincidence that those films have a similar vibe to them. And look, simply put, if you like that Korean sensibility of a horror action film with kind of comedic elements to it as well, you're really going to enjoy this. It's just a fun time at the movies. Colony is already in wide release in most places, so go check it out. The second film I got along to was The Invite. Now, this one was probably the film that I was anticipating the most coming into this festival. I knew that it had undergone somewhat of a bidding war at Sundance, and it did not disappoint. This is one of the funniest films I have seen in a long time, and it probably helped that I saw it with an audience of 2,000 people. But truly, there are so many moments of just great awkwardness that just were hilarious. The film very much feels like a play, and from what I understand, that's quite a deliberate thing on Olivia Wilde's part. Noting that this film was directed by Olivia Wilde and also stars her. All 4 of the cast members, her, Seth Rogen, Penelope Cruz, and Edward Norton, are fantastic. The film has quite a simple premise. It's just 2 couples having dinner together in an apartment. But it works effectively because of how contrasting the relationship dynamics are between those 2 different couples. And this leads to so many of those awkwardly hilarious moments. And when you've got an intimate film like this, it's heavily reliant on the actors keeping you engaged and interested throughout the whole thing, and they really just do a fantastic job. Go and see this movie if you can. I believe it is coming to wide release in Australia in July. It might even be out by the time you're watching this video. Leviticus is an Australian-made horror film that I'm really glad I got to see at this festival. Its message is very clear, but it's delivered in a way that doesn't feel like it's trying to slap you in the face with a message. It's just delivered really well and really effectively. This was quite an emotional film, if I'm being completely honest, and that's despite it being nominally a horror movie. The real horror of this film lies in some of the decisions and the actions that some of the characters make. I think having the demon, so to speak, of the film also present as a regular human really helps kind of reinforce that message that, you know, human beings are kind of the makers of our own horror, or we're the makers of the horror of others. This was the feature debut of an Australian filmmaker named Adrian Chiarella. I'm really excited to see what he does next. This kind of continues a run of some really good Australian-made horror films in the last few years. If you've liked films like Talk to Me, you're probably going to like this one as well. Leviticus is already in wide release. If you haven't had a chance to see it in the theatre yet, I highly encourage you to get out there and see it in a real theatre. The fourth film I got to see was Minotaur. This film is set in Russia in relatively recent times with a backdrop that you don't really need too much explanation to understand what is probably going on. This film wrestles with morality, and it contrasts the way that individuals deal with challenges that are happening on multiple scales. So we've got the large-scale war taking place in the background and how that affects our lead character and our core family of this film, how it's affecting their lives. We've also got our protagonist who is running a business with a lot of people underneath him. So he's got the responsibility of protecting them and all of the challenges that are taking place there. So that's more of like a medium scale challenge that he's having to deal with. And then at the same time, we've got the kind of the smaller scale challenges going on inside of the family itself. There is a lot of, shall we say, friction in the relationship. We see the conflict in trying to balance all of those different challenges at once. This is a slow burn drama from acclaimed Russian director Andrei Tsyaganstev. And it was cool that he was actually in attendance at the screening and introduced the film and gave a Q&A afterwards. And having the opportunity to actually be in the room with the filmmakers and hear them talk about the films, that's what really makes going to this festival extra special for me. Minotaur ended up winning the main competition at the Sydney Film Festival, and this came after it won the Grand Prix prize at Cannes. The final film I saw was Pressure, and you know, the longer I sit with this movie, the more I love it. This film is really about the internal conflict we have when we want to believe something that's convenient, but we are presented with data or information that run contrary to that thing that we want to believe in. And how do we reconcile that? In this case, we've got competing meteorologists saying, hey, the weather's going to be fine on the planned D-Day, and another one saying, actually, the data suggests that it's going to be a storm, and if you send your men out there, they're all going to die. That's really huge stakes. I just found that the way that Andrew Scott portrayed his character was very relatable. And maybe that's because I used to be a scientist, and I can see all of the struggles that he's going through with trying to explain to people who don't have his same background the imperative importance of his findings and how that's going to impact people. But I think that anyone watching this movie can understand what his character is going through, and that's really just delivered through a very compelling performance and a great script. To be honest, this film kind of just fires on all cylinders from a technical perspective. I really want to shout out the score here. The score just supports this film so incredibly well. I also had the chance to go along to several of the events that weren't films, many of which are free. For example, I went along to the Microbudget Champion Talk by Mark Jenkin. He's a director who specializes in making films on a shoestring budget, and just getting to hear him talk about that process was something that I thought would be really beneficial to any young or aspiring filmmakers out there. They also do a trivia night at the Sydney Film Festival. That was fun. I thought I knew stuff about films. Turns out I know very little. Yeah, our team did not do anywhere near as well as I was hoping, but that's okay. Had a really fun time. And the final event that I attended this year was Platform Pitch. This is a really cool event. It's hosted by a group called For Film's Sake. They are champions of producing films from underrepresented populations in Australia. And they organise this event at the Sydney Film Festival every year where they host up to 12 applicants to come together for a week. They spend the week in Sydney. Nobody is supposed to know each other beforehand, and no one is supposed to come in with any preconceived ideas about what they're going to do during that week. But the idea is that you pair up and then come up with an idea for a new film, and by the end of that week, you pitch that film to a live audience where there are also judges who work in the film industry, And it's not a competition, right? The idea is not to pick a winner or anything like that. The idea is simply, let's get creatives in a room who haven't worked together, get them to collaborate and come up with cool new ideas, and then we'll give those people feedback. I don't know if any of the films that have been pitched at this event have actually gone on to become films. I'd be really interested to hear if that had been the case. But in some sense, that's not really the point. The vibes are all positive at this event, and it's really quite entertaining actually being in the audience and seeing everyone present their pitches. Okay, so that's my summary of the Sydney Film Festival. I encourage anyone listening to get along to whatever film festivals take place in your local area. It's just a good time, guys. Congrats to anyone who noticed that in the background is actually Melbourne and not Sydney.